Okay, today we're going to talk about the best blue backgrounds that came with the Commander Legends Battle for Baldur's Gate set. While their original purpose was to act as partner commanders for the many legendary creatures in the set, or a few of them anyway, the pairs often led to disappointingly old strategies with little novelty added to the classic D&D characters. However, these enchantments are very inexpensive cards with equally low mana values that give your commanders additional utility with whatever strategy you may be going for, and should earn a place in the 99 of any of those decks. Like last time, let's start with the backgrounds that are more niche or much less useful than the rest. Candlekeep Sage says commander creatures you own have, when this creature enters or leaves the battlefield, draw a card. Unfortunately, the goal isn't usually to bounce your commander, as far as I know, but instead to bounce your other creatures for more value. What this does is give you a card when you play your commander, and when your commander gets taken out, eventually. It's a very weak effect for a very niche strategy that only works on your commander. I don't think it's really worth the card slot, even in those strategies, but you can prove me wrong in the comments below if I'm wrong. Dungeon Delver says, commanders you own have room abilities of dungeons you own trigger an additional time. Dungeon abilities in Commander are beyond niche. They're practically non-existent in the format, as a primary strategy at least. The only commander that can make use of this ability reliably is Sephris of the Hidden Ways, that actually has a venture ability built into the commander that triggers from mill or creatures dying, strategies that are always present in Commander, or creatures just die in Commander. There is no other commander that makes the dungeon mechanic a main theme of the deck that would make Dungeon Delver useful. So if you're running Sephris, run Dungeon Delver. If you're running literally anything else, skip it. Shameless Charlatan costs 1 and a blue and says commander creatures you own have pay 2 and a blue. This creature becomes a copy of another target creature. Outside of that, if you copy a creature, your commander no longer has any text that works with your current deck, and there's no way to turn the copy back into the original commander without removing it and returning it to the battlefield one way or another. It's an interesting effect that can be fun and it can be effective, but it's not something you'd want to run and use in the majority of commander decks with blue. Okay, so now for the good stuff. Clan Crafter costs 1 and a blue and says commander creatures you own have pay 2 and sack an artifact to put a 1/1 counter on this creature and draw a card. I mainly see this finding a nice cozy place in an artifact sacrifice deck. Power Stone tokens from Brothers War would be a great way to get use out of this card, since you'll be using that mana to pay for an ability, including this one, and then you could just sack the Power Stone. Mishra, Eminent One, creates a token artifact creature that gets sacrificed at the end step, so paying 2 mana and sacking the token to get a counter and a card out of it doesn't sound like a bad deal, in addition to any other value you get from the thing entering the battlefield in the first place. Emery, Lurker of the Lot, can get the sacrificed artifact back if you've sacked it for value, and Silas Wren can become a pain to deal with on its attack while getting the sacked artifact back also. That was fun to say. But Clan Crafter can certainly find a place in budget artifact decks with this particular strategy. Sword Coast Sailor costs 1 and a blue and says commander creatures you own have. Whenever this creature attacks a player, if no opponent has more life than that player, this creature can't be blocked this turn. This is a very simple background that makes a combat strategy easier to accomplish. If you need to swing with your commander, this will guarantee that it gets through to your opponent as long as they don't have any removal on hand. Zur the Enchanter is a really good example here. He tutors for an enchantment when he attacks, including this background. If your opponents have flyers in the air, it makes it much more difficult to make a safe attack. With this enchantment on the field, that's not a problem. If your opponent with the most life is a life gain deck with 150 life, another option is to have this in a deck with a beefy commander. Shorakai is a personal deck I have, and with a power of 8, it's really easy to smash your opponent's face with commander damage and no hope of blocking it with this background on the field. There are of course more on-theme options for this deck like Whirler Rogue, but I'm fishing for options here. Rafik of the Many is a Voltron commander that would find this enchantment particularly effective in letting him get through to the opponent with the most life. Sword Coast Sailor can be a Plan A enchantment in strategies like Voltron, or a Plan B enchantment in any other deck with blue. That utility should earn it a place in any of your blue decks if you're looking for a spot to fill. Feywild Visitor costs 2 and a blue and says, commander creatures you own have. Whenever one or more non-token creatures you control deal combat damage to a player, you create a 1/1 blue fairy dragon creature token with flying. Until this moment, I didn't realize that you could get 3 tokens if your creatures hit each of your opponents, making this much more useful. So if you're in blue and you want to swing at your opponents, I think that you should have this in a place in your deck. Offhand, I could rebuild Satoru Umezawa and throw this in there. Ninjas want to be unblocked to do their thing, so if they're unblocked, they're going to do damage. And since they're coming from your hand, they're non-token creatures, so they'll make flying creature tokens that replace the creatures that you returned to your hand in the first place. I think it's a really good fit there. It could find a place in token strategies, but depending on what non-token creatures you're running, you might have a harder time generating 3 creature tokens. Marnius Calgar would be a great option here since he just draws you cards for tokens entering, so if you're running a combat strategy with swingy creatures that make tokens, this is a perfect fit. At the very bare minimum, Feywild Visitor can be a placeholder until you save up to buy a Bitter Blossom. And that's it for the blue backgrounds. Let me know what you think of this list and what decks you'd put them in the comments below. Next time, we'll talk about the black backgrounds, so look forward to that. Like the video if you liked the video, dislike it if you disliked it, and until next time, I'm Space Coconut, and you're welcome.